So we have a few minutes for each of the speakers to present their startup and their initiatives. I'd like to invite Nayla first on stage. Would you like to tell us about what you do?
So hi, coming from the Middle East and having 5 minutes to tell you what I do and present a solution, and especially challenges, is nearly impossible. In fact, to present challenges, I will need a whole day and at least a UN resolution. But I will try to do so. So, Lebanon, small country, 5 to 6 million people, 1.5 million Syrian refugees adding to Palestinian and Iraqi refugees. So tremendous pressure on the economic, tremendous pressure on the educational sector. 500,000 refugee children in school age. More than half of them out of school because we have no places in school to receive all the students. So the need was to find an alternative solution. And definitely digital could be an alternative solution to scale up education to all those children. How did we do that? So I was formerly a teacher at the education department and faculty, and with a like-minded colleague of mine, we thought about solutions. So we gathered a team of educational experts, and we create innovative digital content based on the school curriculum to help either out-of-school children bridge their way back to school when eventually they will find a place in a school, or to help falling behind children retain in school by giving them support. We do not want to replace school. We are educators. We strongly believe in the role of an educator, but we want to fill the gaps in the meantime. So how do we do that? So this team of experts, we like to say we try to link generation for education. We take senior educator with experience, and we link them to young, dedicated volunteer, and together they create content based on the school curriculum. How we deliver that? Through our magic box. So the box is based on the Raspberry Pi technology. In fact, I will open it. It's a tiny server. All our content are on this micro SD card, and we upload the content on the card. We put the card on the tiny server. The tiny server works on a power bank, so if you have no electricity in tented, we work in tented facilities. So if we have no electricity in tented facility, we put a power bank. It have a 10-hour autonomy, and it's completely wireless. So all our content is in the box. The box is hotspot 30 devices, either tablets, computer, or phones. Devices are not a problem. We partner with an NGO who give refurbished computer, but devices are not a problem, as many initiatives gave away computer. We have computer lab everywhere, but they are not used. So the idea was to use those computer labs in all those areas. And so we provide our content through the box. We also provide training. The content is very easy. The way to use our content is very easy. We provide what we call an accelerated training program to the teachers, schools, and facilitators. And this is how we get to the field. We try to work very closely with the field to better understand the need and to have solutions adapted to the need of the field. So this is the way we solved some of the challenges. We still have a lot of challenges. One of them is, do we become a social enterprise even if we are not entrepreneurs, just to maintain ourselves and to sustain? And other challenges is that Lebanon became a tremendous experimental lab, and we have a lot of resistance because teachers are fed up, refugees are fed up to be treated like guinea pigs. Everybody with an idea will come and experiment it in the region. So The third one is the lack of coordination between NGO and project, everybody protecting their ideas and their projects. And so this is a huge also problem to solve, because sometimes we do the same and we compete.
A big round of applause for Nayla. So we'll give the stage to Aline, the co-founder of NaTakallam.
Thank you. So firstly, I would just like to thank the entire Techfugees team for their amazing work pulling all these actors in the Techfugees space together. And I also just want to say that when I mention refugees in my presentation, I want to acknowledge the complexity and limitation of this term as well. So following after Nayla, who is based in Lebanon, I just would like to read a quick testimony by someone named Zreik, who is a Syrian computer scientist. Well, that's what he was in Syria. Being a Syrian refugee in Lebanon is a big problem. I left Syria to escape the difficult situation and entered Lebanon in 2013. And from the very first moment of my entry, I was associated with this word, refugee. With this word, life has become harder than it is. It is impossible to find a stable job, a stable life. The refugee has to work for a small salary only because he is a refugee. Or to be able to live, he has to work for hard, long periods with unfair pay, in addition to dealing with strict labor laws, forcing us to depend on aid from humanitarian organizations. But NaTakallam changed everything. As a NaTakallam conversation partner, I have been given a sense of self-confidence and feel I am able to do something even if I am a refugee. Through NaTakallam, I meet students from the US, Britain, Germany, France, Pakistan, China, Iran, and the Middle East. I help them to develop their Arabic skills. We talk about our lives and about the world. NaTakallam has also given me the chance to talk with college students in the US at schools like Columbia, Yale, Tufts, and others. NaTakallam allows me to meet the world through my small computer screen. While I lost any contact with the outside world because I am what they call here in Lebanon a Syrian refugee, NaTakallam gave me an identity again, helped me be part of society. It is simply my window to the world. So that is my demo for you today. It is not a tech demo, but it is to me a demonstration of how NaTakallam has been able to use technology in a very simple way to create deep impact. So conversation partners at NaTakallam are basically language tutors and also language translators who work over Skype and via the gig economy. And so they access an income despite being barred from the local economy and from society as refugees. So basically, the original concept of NaTakallam was to support Syrians in Lebanon who don't get access to a work permit, are highly skilled, and can connect through the internet with anyone in the world who wants to work on their colloquial Arabic dialect. For those who know what Arabic is, it's very complex, and the modern standard Arabic, which you learn in school, is not really what's going to help you converse with people on the ground. So since then, we've actually expanded to work with other languages. So with Persian, we have Iranian and Afghan refugees who can give Persian conversation classes. We just recently launched with Venezuelan refugees who are teaching Spanish. But we also have programs in schools, and we also now offer cultural exchange sessions for organizations. And as I mentioned, we do translation services because that is another opportunity for refugees to work remotely. We kind of believe that we're in this trend of the digital nomad for people to work wherever they can, wherever they want to travel to. But refugees are actually forced digital nomads. So we really believe that they should be the ones who are really given that opportunity first and foremost. So just to talk a bit about traction, because I know that people do like numbers. So we've been operating for over 3 years, and we've connected over 3,500 unique users in 65 different countries, with over 110 refugees who've earned $400,000 cumulatively. And as well, what we have actually noticed is beyond the numbers, and what refugees have ranked as the most powerful and important aspect of their work with NaTakallam is the feeling of social inclusion, of being valued, and actually connecting with individuals around the world. So as I mentioned, we're also working in schools because we believe that social inclusion is a two-way street. And so, yes, refugees will make efforts to integrate within the local community, but they also need to have a community that welcomes them. So that is why we have these programs in schools. And this, for example, is a classroom in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, New York. And these students, after having their 1-hour session with Hadiya, who is a Syrian refugee living in a refugee camp in Erbil, they actually told their teacher that at the end of the year they wanted to donate their classroom end-of-year gift to a refugee cause. So I actually did not track my time at all, but I'm just going to wrap it up there and really leave the space for the discussion. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Aline. A round of applause.
Hi everybody, so my name is Jack Steadman. I am the head of digital at Help Refugees. Help Refugees is kind of like Techfugees. Some of you might have heard Mike telling Techfugees' story yesterday. Like Techfugees, we started on social media. We basically put a hashtag together, Help Calais, to try and collect a van full of donations and raise £1,000 to take to what we assumed would be a big NGO that would be supporting the 5,000 refugees that were in Calais 3 years ago. And this is the first van. And when we got to Calais, we found that actually there weren't any big NGOs operating there, and that actually it was very small grassroots organizations. And within a week of us putting this fundraiser live and trying to raise £1,000, we'd raised £56,000, and we were getting sent 7,000 items every single day. And when we got to Calais and realized that there weren't other organizations working there, we realized that there wasn't really any turning back. And sort of since then, that was just over 3 years ago, and since then we've worked with 80 projects across 12 countries and supported 750,000 refugees, displaced people and migrants across Europe and the Middle East. And what we tend to do is provide emergency aid. But it can range from everything from funding rescue boats to running the operation in Calais to women's services. And the main thread that runs through what we do is that we try to fill gaps. I was in Calais for a little bit over a year. I was the field manager there. And when I came back to the UK, I was trying to think about what the gaps were in the UK, because they weren't as obvious as they were in Calais. In Calais, obviously, there was at the time 10,000 people there. And the gaps didn't look the same in the UK as they did there, but it became really obvious after returning to the UK and speaking to people that the biggest gap was information of services, and that's where we met Code Your Future.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dreuille. I am a refugee from Cameroon. When I was a child, I already have this dream to work in the tech. So last year, I joined Code Your Future. It's a bootcamp that provides free training for refugees and asylum seekers in UK. So when I joined them, I didn't know how to code. And after 6 months of coding, I'm now a full stack developer working on the welcome guide. The welcome guide is a director of service for caseworkers who work with asylum and refugees in UK. I've been working in this project in a team with 3 guys. They are students of Code Your Future. And the question is, what is the welcome guide? So after we have been talking with caseworkers, asylum seekers, and refugees, we noticed that the biggest issue was the lack of information. And most of the information available for refugees were not like updates. They were very old. Most of charity and NGO, they didn't have like enough resource and time to develop this kind of product.
And actually, some of those are kind of linked. The part of the reason why the information was out of date is because the organizations didn't have capacity, and they would try and fix it and spend 3 months putting together a resource, and then that would be the only time they could spend on that project for the next few years. And so there's information that's 6 years old that caseworkers in the UK still regularly use. And obviously that information doesn't include any of the groups that have sprung up in the last 3 years, which I think is probably most organisations here. As Louis said, we were talking to refugees, asylum seekers, migrants, caseworkers, trying to work out what the best approach to fix this would be. And it became obvious that the problem was that there was always a single point of failure, and we needed to take more of a crowdsourced approach. I remember speaking to one caseworker who said he basically just wanted a Wikipedia for caseworkers where he could collaborate with lots of other organizations to keep a resource up to date. So he's not ever responsible for doing the whole thing, but everybody is kind of working together. This model is actually already working with a shared Google Sheet that caseworkers use to update information about services. But obviously, like, that's not a really scalable solution. So we were looking about how we could replicate that. And yeah, the project will have an API where other organizations can connect to it and build apps on top of it. And they get the benefit of the up-to-date information about services. And I think probably what makes our project really unique and what makes us very lucky is that we have developers like Louis and the rest of the team that you saw just before, who are experts by experience. You know, they know what it's like to arrive in a country that they've never been to before, and to find that there isn't enough information about services, and to find that, you know, it would be really helpful if there was one. And yeah.
Yes, actually, I remember when I arrived in UK, I didn't have like any family. And I have struggled a lot to get the right information. So I wish that at this time I have this type of platform where I can just looking for immigration service and then enter my postcode and look for the near organization next to me, and then just take their detail, their telephone number, and then contact them.
Exactly, and it's worth mentioning that in our discussions, it became really obvious that that people felt the best thing to do to make sure this was up to date was to design it for the caseworkers themselves. So as you can see, there's a little edit button there, and we've basically tried to make it as easy as possible for caseworkers to fit it into the workflow of the caseworkers. Where do we go from here? We've just launched a beta version. I'm going to share a link in a second. And we're looking for partners. So we've been working on this since, I think, about February. We have like funding until February, March, but we need partners to sort of start supporting this project in the long term. We need a community of developers. As I've said, I mentioned before, this is an open source project, and we hope that, you know, this is beneficial for refugees and asylum seekers and migrants, but also can be beneficial for other sectors. The tech itself is completely open source, so any developers in the audience that would like to be involved in this project, do get in touch. And finally, we're looking to expand. At the moment, the directory is London only, and we're testing among caseworkers in London, but we're looking to expand across the UK and into other countries. And if you want to test it, you can just go to dos.codeyourfuture.io. Thank you.
Thank you.
Valentine, you want to tell us about what you do with Reconnect?
Sure. So good morning, everyone. So I'm Valentine, and I'm COO of Reconnect, which I'm going to present to you this morning. So Reconnect is a French social startup that aims to use technology to solve some social problems, but I guess that's something many of you here try to do. The project was born actually 4 years ago with the observation that for people in precarious situation, and especially refugees or asylum seekers, it is very difficult to store documents. And when you lose your documents, that means that you have difficulty to prove your identity, of course, but also in the end to access to your rights. And for those who were here yesterday, we talked a lot about these topics already. What we noticed also was that this is a huge problem for the social actors who accompany those refugees. Because, well, in France, we estimate that 20 to 30% of the time of social workers here in France is spent on administrative processes to redo identity papers. That's why we thought from the beginning that the solution could come from those actors. So we tried to work with them, and at the same time we realized that online storage solutions are spreading widely in the, with the general public. So our first idea was to bring that technology, cloud-based technology, in the social sector that doesn't use it, and for people who would really benefit this technology. So we didn't try to invent something new. We just tried to impulse a change of habits in this sector, and we spent many months experimenting existing solutions with 4 or 5 social structures here in Paris, working with the professionals and the beneficiaries of those structures. We pointed at the fact that there was really a need to have solutions to store documents, but at the same time there was some barriers. First of all, the difficulty to access for many refugees or beneficiaries, the difficulty to access these solutions, and also the need to share some of the information with the social workers, and sometimes even to delegate the account to a social referent. So that's the time when we decided to develop our specific solution, which is le cloud solidaire. So concretely, how does it work? It's a web platform with 2 different entrances. On one side, the refugees can have an access to an online, personal and secure account to store all their information. And on the other side, you have a professional access to manage information for the social workers. We also developed an API so that we can connect our tool to the existing softwares of NGOs or public institutions we're working with, and so that they can easily access the information. So for example, here in Paris, we have the SAMU Social, which is a big NGO. They're using the API to transfer automatically some documents that they generate in their software to all the families that who stay in emergency hotels in Paris, so that they can, for example, with these documents, enroll their children at school or get some food aid, for instance. So we launched this tool 3 years ago, and now we are working with 300 social actors mainly in France. NGOs just like what you see, Aurore, Emmaüs, la Croix-Rouge, and so on, but also public institutions like social services from city halls or social services from the hospitals in Paris. And all those actors allow more than 5,000 people to store all their documents. So just like any other provider of digital solution, our work today is in one side is to keep improving our tool so that it meets the needs of our users. But as we are here to talk about technology, I thought it was important also to highlight the fact that the other part of our work today, and which is becoming the main part of our work, I would say, is not technical work. It's really about convincing new actors to use our tool with their beneficiaries, training professionals, and accompanying, supporting our users on a daily basis, like social workers and of course beneficiaries too. So yeah, I would like to conclude by saying that impulsing a technological change in the social sector is really a human daily work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valentine. So I'd like to open up with a question for the entire panel. I think the fascinating aspect of all this is the merge and the fusion between technology and the humanitarian field. So we're using, frontier tech, the latest discoveries, the latest developments in technology to help. But we know what's been the problem in the humanitarian field. Sometimes it's referred to as the white savior complex, right? Sometimes when trying to empower people, we deprive them of dignity. Because even the term empowerment, right, carries that connotation that, the helper has a power that the person being helped doesn't have. So I wanted to ask, how do you deal with that? How do you ensure, do you have processes to ensure that you listen to refugees as well, that you incorporate them in the process, and that it's really a two-way road?
I just asked Louis and the team. No, I mean, I guess like for our project, it's been really important from the word go that we're making something. Actually, we did a bunch of focus groups really early on, and found that people were sort of saying, when I arrive in the UK, I actually don't want to have something like an app or something that's going to tell me where to go. I'm going to trust like volunteers and caseworkers and people like this, and I want them to have something in their hand. And that was actually, I think Mike said yesterday, made a joke yesterday about pivot moments, but that was a real pivot moment for us, because we were thinking about making something directly for beneficiaries, but we were told that it's better to empower the people that are actually helping them. So yeah, I mean, we always try to make it at the center of everything we do, and it really helps to have Louis and the Code Your Future offering design insight for sure.
And what was the process to get users? Because sometimes when working with refugees, we're competing with a huge force, which is Facebook. Refugees have been using Facebook groups to talk to each other. They trust each other a lot more than someone new coming in to tell them like, hey, I can help you. So how do you ensure, and how do you reach out to them, basically?
Well, we have the reverse problem. We have too many teachers reaching out to us, so please sign up to NaTakallam so we can give them jobs. It's funny because I think that access to an income is just so crucial, that refugees are going to be constantly looking for those opportunity. And unfortunately, I mean, this is a space that is familiar with refugees, but sometimes the media portrays them as people who don't know how to use a phone and who are living in of course, the typical image is someone in a camp, and when you don't have a job, you job hunt, right? That's what we all do, right? So this is what refugees are doing. They're job hunting. They're looking for ways to make an income. So for us, this hasn't been a problem. So I would say from the user end of refugees who, to answer your earlier question, we treat refugees as customers. Customer satisfaction on the refugee side and on the language learner side is critical. So we engage them in every step of the way. And we also really, as we're getting to be a more established organization, are looking at upward mobility opportunities for refugees, so that if they're a conversation partner for many months and have demonstrated that they're really excellent and skilled at this, they become kind of a senior conversation partner who is actively helping us with the recruitment efforts, with the training of the refugees. So that's really kind of a model that we're trying to build into our organization. But I hope, so that answers kind of two of your questions, I would say, in one.
What I would say, based on my experience, I would say for most of the time, it's difficult for refugees to share their information on social media. They think that because their immigration case is still going, they think that maybe the government will get that information and use that against them. It's very difficult for them to trust this kind of platform and use that.
What about Valentine? When you reach out to them, I mean, protecting basically their identity through their documentation must be a very delicate issue, right?
Of course it is, yes, and it's exactly what you said. We have to build trust, and for us, as we work with existing NGOs and institutions, we rely on the trust that exists between those, for example, an NGO, and it's not really a trust of a refugee to an NGO. It's more of a refugee with one person that will accompany him, and we rely on this trust to build the trust for our tool. Because if that person talk about one service, then the refugee would get trust on it.
Right. Now, what happens when you see several different actors doing similar efforts? What's your stand on partnerships, and what's your stand on competitivity? Because we're talking about startups as well, we're talking about businesses. So how do you deal with that kind of balance?
I can answer that. On this project, probably the first few months were just spent trying to work out how many people in the UK and elsewhere, there have been similar initiatives elsewhere, but how many people are already trying to do something similar, and just to try and get as many of them on the same page as possible, because there were so many people. Like, people saying, I'm gonna map all of the services in the UK, and there were just, there are people in different cities doing it, and people building different things, and it actually still happens. There was another new project started up 2 months ago, but we ended up sort of forming basically a group that has been meeting quarterly of actors that are in the sector, people who are interested in the idea of a directory, of a map of services, and we just meet quarterly, and we are driving the project. Like, Louis is the lead developer, and our updates form most of the basis of those meetings, but at the same time we really encourage input, and we encourage other people to feel like they're part of the project. And it's a big part of the ethos of this project has been that we're not in competition, and we want as many people to be contributing to this as possible. We actually, we help refugees, like Louis is from Code Your Future, but it's not going to say that anywhere on the site, because just even by sort of doing that, you're putting some kind of ownership on it. And we've gone with a more neutral brand that doesn't have associations with other organizations, because the idea is that it is something that it will only really work if organizations feel that they're included in it, and that it's not somebody else's project, that they can be a part of it as well.
Nayla, I'm wondering what's happening in the educational field.
Well, it's much more complicated in Lebanon. Refugee means international money. International money means I have to find an idea to get this money, and that leads to competition. And so it was shocking for me, coming from the academic world to the humanitarian world, where I thought I will find cooperation, collaboration, people working for the same humanitarian goal, to see how many competition, and it was all about too much money. So too much money is good and bad. Too much money means also corruption, and it was very difficult. What we're trying to do, and this will also answer your first question, is we work very closely with our partners. So we build a consortium with refugees themselves, but also with other NGOs. So every single project we try to present it as a consortium, as many NGOs working together.
Right. And speaking of money, how did you, so from the beginning, when you set out to start the project, how did you create a business model that ensures sustainability? Because what we're seeing is that in several political agendas or international NGOs agendas, the issue of refugees is starting to decline as a priority. So how do you ensure sustainability in the long term?
Well, for us, when we started, it was only enthusiasm. We had no business plan at all. We were academicians. And then we participated in an accelerator just to have that. We have the chance to have a close collaboration with the Lebanese government for the accreditation of our content. So this sustained it in the formal educational sector. It is used in public schools. So this was a way of... We still have work to do. It's still...
Right. Jack and Louis, are you a social startup? Are you an NGO? What's the...
So, we're both NGOs. So Code Your Future is an NGO technically, isn't it?
Yes. I'm like a student from Code Your Future. Yeah.
And Help Refugees is like this is a very different project to what we normally do, and we're normally a humanitarian aid organization, so we're an NGO.
You're working with international funding, basically.
We're 80% crowdfunded, so we do things like buy these T-shirts. You can get them. Search Choose Love T-shirt. But yeah, we're about 80% crowdfunded, and we don't have like institutional funding or anything like that. Yeah, we've been increasingly moving towards grants, but as I say, we started as a hashtag and a crowdfunding page that suddenly just launched off, and that enables us to act really flexibly, and it is really important. It helps us to respond to needs on the ground, and we're not restricted by you know, this is your funding is for this, and you have to do this, because if the situation changes, we're able to react to that. But we are looking to, you know, diversify as much as possible as well.
Yes, I just want to add that Code Your Future there is for asylum refugees, and the training is free. And even if you don't have like a computer, they will provide computer for you. And the good thing with Code Your Future is that even after the training, they follow you. They help you to have like your first job in the tech. And I think now they are based in London, Manchester, Glasgow. I think they have even a boot camp in Colombia. They plan to like expand not only in UK but even in Europe, in Africa.
So Aline, you were saying before that you started diversifying and introducing other services as well. Was that something that you set off from the beginning as part of the business model, or how did that evolve?
So I guess I can just talk about how NaTakallam came to life briefly. I really had no background in social entrepreneurship and startups. In fact, I was a bit irritated by the obsession with startups because it was just, you know, everyone was talking about it, and I associated the startup sector with kind of, you know, fast growth and money-driven organizations, and I really have to go back on that because I really have grown so convinced of the power of startups and social entrepreneurship to create really great, impactful, sustainable change. I was actually looking myself for ways to practice my Arabic, and I was, you know, thinking of all the Syrians who are just like me in Lebanon, and from one day to the next, they're robbed from a future. You know, people who had, you know, studied were really, you know, especially, you know, pre-war Syria is a country that had a very high literacy rate. A number of really qualified individuals. So it was really actually, I was like, you know what, well, maybe I can, you know, Syrians can be my language partner and help me practice my broken Lebanese Arabic. So it really was a candid idea, and it was very pragmatic for me. It's really was like a win-win solution. You know, I can you know, afford these language classes because in New York City tutoring is very expensive, and then, you know, in exchange it's an income source, and also I thought that the one-on-one interaction creates a really powerful bond between people. So we diversified, and you know, when we came up with the idea to work with universities was definitely one of the first ideas we had, just because I had studied in schools and I knew that you have this language lab opportunities, and you know, we thought that's a great way to have refugees get work. And then also we, you know, immediately realized that, of course, the refugee crisis isn't just in the Middle East, and with many other refugee communities and languages, and so that was our long-term plan. Translation was a bit of a surprise. We actually hadn't thought of that because it is still a different line of work, even though it's tied to language, of course. But people wrote to us and told us, you know, we have these documents to translate and we want to support refugees who don't have a job. So can you do this for us? And so we realized that that was actually a whole other you know, world of opportunity for remote work and for leveraging, you know, language skills. Of course, the vetting and the training and, you know, making sure of the quality is very different, but it's actually been one of our biggest areas of growth. So yeah, it was kind of a combination of ideas we had from the beginning, but of course the startup world is, that's what's nice about it, is you can pivot, right? You're not tied to, you know, these funding plans that are 4 years and strict and sometimes decided on by funders in New York City who aren't on the ground or who aren't in the office understanding how things are quickly shifting. And so to speak quickly to the NGO versus for-profit or non-profit or social enterprise, I would say that being a social enterprise really has freed us from the weight of what donors might want back home. We're able to be very nimble and quick and adapt, and of course in refugee crises or in emergency settings that can become protracted crises, I think that's really, really helpful to have this freedom to really act on not what your budget says, because you've submitted a budget for 4 years with this kind of planning, but really kind of take it a bit more, spontaneously and pragmatically on the ground.
Okay, a big round of applause for the speakers. Thank you very much.